Hello, and welcome to this short video series on understanding the free market fallacy. My name's Dave Lyon. I'm founder of Big Picture SI, a social impact consultancy based in Austin, Texas. My goal for this series is to show you why many of our pressing social issues, such as full-time workers making poverty wages or the high cost of healthcare, why these actually arise from the economy itself. More specifically, they arise from poor regulation of the economy. A deregulatory, small government approach that allows big business to block competition and increase its profits at the direct expense of economic growth, consumers, workers, and small businesses. This tends to elude most of us, both because economics can sound complicated and because we have been inundated with free market ideology that creates a false trust in the actions of big business and unregulated markets. By the end of this series, you'll be able to identify when corporations have gotten too big and markets too concentrated, and you'll understand why certain pro-competition regulations, such as raising the minimum wage or capping high drug prices, are actually good for the economy. You'll also have a sense of how much the absence of these protections, many of which were in place and effective before deregulatory fervor took hold, how much this costs our economy on an annual basis, and who bears the bulk of that cost. All we'll need is a small set of fundamental economic ideas integrated into a big picture systems framework that makes it easy to apply these concepts to a wide range of industries. This deeper understanding will, in turn, I hope, help us engage with these issues as better informed voters. The URL at the bottom of this slide contains a link to the paper we're discussing, the free market fallacy. Our economy has become a major area of concern for Americans, according to Pew Research, with 70% feeling that it's rigged to benefit the wealthy. They may not be wrong. Inequality is soaring, as this chart from the Economic Policy Institute shows. Median wages used to track increases in productivity up until the late 1970s, where they diverged sharply from the steady gains in productivity, almost flatlining in the years since. This chart from the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities shows how wage increases have been much higher for the top earners than everyone else. Furthermore, the poverty rate, the bottom curve in this chart, has hovered around the same value for decades. And healthcare costs have been skyrocketing. These are not the inevitable outcomes of an unpredictable economy, as conventional wisdom tells us. Rather, they are primarily the result of policy choices made over the past decades that have made our markets much less competitive and thus less efficient than they could be. As the economist James Galbraith put it regarding labor markets, the ostensibly private free market character of the changes in the wage structure is an illusion. Relative wages are much more a matter of politics and much less a matter of markets than is generally believed. Part one of this series uses the ideas, competition, economies of scale, and innovation to answer the question, how big is too big regarding corporate size and market concentration? Then in part two, we'll look at the cost to society when markets become too concentrated. We'll see how a market's total benefit to society increases at first as companies get bigger and markets more concentrated. And then it peaks at a level we'll call optimal scale, falling to lower and lower values after that point. This means that society not only has an interest in growing industries to optimal scale, but also an equal interest in keeping them from growing beyond optimal scale. We'll see that the reason the government has a necessary role to play is that in many industries, firms are incented to grow beyond optimal scale. In other words, profit maximizing scale is generally higher than optimal scale. And executives of large firms are incented to grow their firms as big as possible, even beyond what maximizes profits for the corporation, because their incomes keep growing as the company they lead gets larger. To get to optimal scale, firms in the yellow zone of our chart invest in innovation and in harnessing economies of scale, activities that can provide a net benefit to society. To grow larger than optimal scale, however, firms focus on reducing the competition they face because they have exhausted their economies of scale or their patent-protected monopoly is about to expire. These firms reduce competition by buying it up directly through mergers and acquisitions, by creating barriers to entry, such as patent tickets and branded pharmaceuticals, and by spreading misinformation, for example, about the harm of tobacco or of fossil fuels. In part 2, we will describe these anti-competitive measures in more detail. Through examples in 6 industries, we'll see just how much these actions increase profits, frequently by 15 to 50%, and how much they take for consumers, workers, and small businesses. Furthermore, we'll see that this is a net loss to society overall. The increase in profits is always less than the amount taken from consumers and workers, and it intrinsically slows down the economy. The series will close with an explanation of how pro-competition regulations can unwind these effects. Free market ideology has led us astray here as well, giving us the impression that all markets respond to regulation the same way perfectly competitive markets do, that if a cost on a business is raised, that employment and output will have to be cut. Not the case at all, however, in concentrated markets, as we'll see. Pro-competition regulations that increase costs or lower prices can increase employment and increase output in concentrated markets because they are restoring competitive market conditions. Thus, raising the minimum wage up to the value it would be in a competitive market actually maintains or increases employment. Capping sky-high drug prices would increase output. Best of all, the cost to pay for the higher wages or the lower prices comes entirely from excess corporate profits, leaving intact profits from economies of scale and innovation. In our next 2 videos, we'll dive into understanding returns to scale in detail, why societal returns to scale peak, and why businesses and executives' returns continue to increase beyond that point. Video 4 will illustrate how the hospital, fast food, and retail industries have grown beyond optimal scale and how much excess profit they extract from consumers and workers by doing so. We'll also describe why unions are often a necessary and economically efficient way to protect workers against high degrees of market power. Video 5 illustrates how firms use barriers to entry and misinformation to reduce competition and increase profits, seen through the examples of the prescription drug and fossil fuel industries. Finally, the series will wrap up with conclusions and key takeaways in video 6. Chief among these takeaways is the tremendous opportunity we have to invigorate our economy and our society by establishing protections against market power and externalized costs. Protections that will return trillions of dollars each year to consumers, workers, and small businesses, and will improve the health of our people, our environment, and our climate, all while leaving intact profits from economies of scale and innovation. This is an economy that can work for everyone. Thank you for joining me on this journey. I look forward to seeing you in video 2.